A man with 4 wives, 12 sons, and a lifetime of running from his own past gathers his sons around his deathbed. He is old now, blind most likely. His hands shake as he reaches for each of them in turn. And what comes out of his mouth in that room is not a farewell speech. It is not a list of instructions for dividing up his estate. It is prophecy, 12 separate prophecies, one for each son, and together they will shape the identity of an entire nation for the next 3,000 years. Most people hear the phrase 12 tribes of Israel and think of a list to memorize. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, and so on, in whatever order Sunday school taught it to them. A genealogical chart, something you skim past on the way to the parts of the Bible that actually matter. That is a mistake, because when you slow down and actually read what Jacob says over each of his sons in Genesis chapter 49, and then trace what happens to each of those 12 family lines across the rest of the Old Testament, you find something remarkable. These are not just names, they are character studies, they are warnings, they are promises, and several of them contain the exact blueprint for what would show up centuries later in the person of Jesus Christ. We are going to walk through all 12 tribes one at a time in the order Jacob blessed them. We are going to look at what their names mean in Hebrew, what Jacob actually said about them, and what became of them. And by the end, I think you will agree that the 12 tribes of Israel are not a list. They are a story about what God does with deeply flawed people when he commits to building something through them anyway. And this is not just a story confined to the pages of Genesis. Outside the Bible, one of the earliest confirmations that Israel existed as a distinct people in the land of Canaan comes from an Egyptian monument called the Merneptah Stele, dated to around 1208 BC, which mentions Israel by name among the peoples of the region. The 12 tribes were not a later legend written back into history. They were a real confederation of family lines living in a real land whose identity had already solidified by the time Egypt's own scribes felt the need to carve their existence into stone. Let's start with the eldest. Reuben is Jacob's firstborn, the son of Leah, the wife Jacob never wanted but was tricked into marrying. In the ancient world, being firstborn meant everything: a double portion of the inheritance, leadership of the family after the father was gone. Reuben had it all, by birth, before he did a single thing to earn or lose it. And then he lost it. Genesis chapter 35 records, almost in passing, that Reuben slept with Bilhah, his father's concubine. No commentary, no drama in the text itself. But Jacob never forgot it, and when the old man finally speaks his blessing over Reuben, the wound is still open. "Reuben, you are my firstborn," Jacob says in Genesis 49. "My might and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power. Unstable as water you shall not excel, because you went up to your father's bed, and you defiled it. Unstable as water." In Hebrew the word is pachaz, and it carries the sense of something reckless, boiling over, unable to hold its shape. Water takes the form of whatever container it is poured into. It cannot be trusted to stand on its own. That is Jacob's verdict on his oldest son: all the potential in the world, and none of the discipline to carry it. And here is the detail that changes everything. The tribe of Reuben lives out that verdict for the rest of Israel's history. They settle east of the Jordan River, outside the Promised Land proper, a border tribe rather than a central one. In the book of Judges, when Deborah calls Israel to battle against a Canaanite oppressor, the tribe of Reuben is singled out for staying home. "Why did you sit among the sheepfolds to hear the piping for the flocks?" the Song of Deborah asks in Judges chapter 5. Great resolve, the text says of Reuben, but ultimately they stayed put. Unstable as water. The verdict from the deathbed becomes the epitaph of the tribe. If you have ever had potential handed to you and then squandered it through one reckless season, this is the part of the Bible that was written for you. The story does not end there for Reuben's descendants, but this first blessing sets the pattern for the whole chapter. Jacob is not handing out platitudes. He is describing, with unsettling accuracy, who his sons actually are.
Simeon and Levi come next, and Jacob addresses them together because what defines them is something they did together.
Genesis chapter 34 tells the story. Their sister Dinah is assaulted by a Canaanite prince named Shechem,
and Simeon and Levi respond
not with justice but with massacre, tricking the entire city of Shechem into circumcision and then slaughtering every man while they were recovering, unable to defend themselves. Jacob's blessing, if you can call it that, is really a curse. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Instruments of cruelty are in their dwelling place. Let not my soul enter their council. Let not my honor be united to their assembly. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they hamstrung an ox. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. I will divide them and scatter them. That is a specific, concrete prophecy, and it comes true for both tribes, but in two completely different ways, and that difference is one of the most fascinating turns in the entire 12-tribe story.
Simeon's scattering plays out exactly as it sounds.
The tribe of Simeon receives a small allotment of land inside Judah's territory, effectively absorbed, never given a fully independent inheritance. The book of Joshua chapter 19 actually says it outright. Simeon's inheritance was carved out of the portion of the children of Judah, because Judah's original territory was too large for them to occupy alone. Simeon fades from the record. By the time you reach the later books of the Old Testament, Simeon is barely mentioned, its cities absorbed into Judah's own administrative lists in the book of Chronicles. The curse simply happens. Levi's scattering is the same word, the same prophecy, and yet it becomes something entirely different. Here is what most people miss. In Exodus chapter 32, after Israel builds and worships the golden calf at the base of Mount Sinai, Moses calls out, "Whoever is on the Lord's side, come to me." And it is the tribe of Levi that responds. And that day, in judgment against the idolatry, the Levites are consecrated for service to God. The very violence and zeal that got Levi cursed at the deathbed becomes, when redirected toward righteousness instead of vengeance, the qualification for priesthood. The scattering still happens. The Levites receive no territorial inheritance at all. They are literally scattered among the other 11 tribes, given cities within each tribe's land instead of one unified region. But the scattering that was a curse for Simeon becomes, for Levi, a strategy, because a tribe with no land of its own, distributed into every corner of the nation, is a tribe whose entire job becomes teaching, mediating, and maintaining the worship of God wherever Israel lives. The exact same prophecy. Two opposite outcomes, based entirely on what each tribe did with its wound. Judah is next, and this is where the chapter changes tone completely. Where Reuben got instability and Simeon and Levi got a curse dressed up as prophecy, Judah gets something extraordinary. Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise, Jacob says. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down. He lies down as a lion. And as a lion, who shall rouse him? And then comes the line that Jewish and Christian readers alike have puzzled over and pointed to for millennia. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the people. Think about what is happening here. Judah is not the firstborn. He is not even close. He is the fourth son. He is also not a particularly impressive character earlier in Genesis. It is Judah who suggests selling Joseph into slavery rather than killing him outright. It is Judah who fathers children through his own daughter-in-law Tamar in one of the more uncomfortable stories in the whole book. And yet, it is Judah, not Reuben, not Levi, who receives the promise of kingship. The scepter, the one from whom the ruler will come. This is the moment where the 12 tribes stop being simply a family history and start being a prophetic thread that runs the entire length of Scripture, because 13 chapters and roughly 700 years later, God tells the prophet Samuel to anoint a shepherd boy from Bethlehem named David as king over Israel. And David's tribe is Judah, the scepter, exactly as promised. And it does not stop with David. Matthew chapter 1 opens the entire New Testament with a genealogy, tracing the line of Jesus Christ back through David, back through Judah's descendants, all the way to Abraham. The book of Revelation, the very last book of the Bible, describes Jesus with a title that reaches straight back to Genesis 49, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. From a deathbed blessing over a flawed fourth son to the throne room of heaven, the thread never breaks. If you have ever felt like you were not the obvious choice, not the firstborn, not the one anyone expected greatness from, this is the part of the Bible that was written for you. Zebulun and Issachar come next in Jacob's blessing, though in birth order Issachar actually came first. Zebulun's blessing is short and geographic. Zebulun shall dwell by the haven of the sea. He shall become a haven for ships, and his border shall adjoin Sidon. What happens? The tribe of Zebulun settles in the north, along trade routes near the Mediterranean coast, becoming a commercial and maritime hub for the nation. Issachar's blessing is stranger, and honestly a little unflattering on the surface. Issachar is a strong donkey. Lying down between two burdens, he saw that rest was good, and that the land was pleasant. He bowed his shoulder to bear a burden, and became a band of slaves. It sounds like Jacob is calling his son lazy, or worse, complicit in his own oppression. But here is what most people never realize. Later in the Old Testament, in 1 Chronicles chapter 12, when David is gathering his mighty men, the text singles out the tribe of Issachar for a completely different quality. Of the sons of Issachar who had understanding of the times to know what Israel ought to do. Not warriors, not the largest tribe, the men known for wisdom, for reading the moment correctly. The strong donkey bowed under a burden becomes over generations a people known for discernment, for the patience to carry weight and think clearly under it rather than react. Dan's blessing is where the chapter turns dark again, and it is worth sitting with, because Dan's story is one of the more sobering threads in the whole Old Testament. Dan shall judge his people, Jacob says, as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path, that bites the horse's heels so that its rider shall fall backward, a serpent by the road. And that is exactly the tribe's trajectory. In the book of Judges chapter 18, rather than driving out the Canaanites from their allotted territory as commanded, the tribe of Dan largely fails to take their land, migrates north, and sets up an idolatrous shrine of their own, a rival worship center to the one God had commanded in Jerusalem. It is one of the darkest episodes in the book of Judges. And here is the detail that should stop you cold. When the 12 tribes are listed in Revelation chapter 7, sealed for God's protection in the end times, Dan is the one tribe missing from the list. 12 tribes named, and Dan is silently absent, replaced by an additional listing of Joseph's line. The serpent by the road, biting at the heel. It is the same imagery used all the way back in Genesis chapter 3, the curse on the serpent in the garden, that it would bruise the heel of the offspring of the woman. Whether or not that connection is intentional on the author's part, the pattern of Dan as a tribe defined by spiritual compromise runs consistently from Judges through the very last book of the Bible. Gad, Asher, and Naphtali receive shorter blessings, but each still carries a distinct identity. Gad, a troop shall tribute him, but he shall triumph at last. The Hebrew wordplay here is dense. Gad's own name means troop or fortune, and Jacob is essentially saying that though raiders will press hard against Gad, Gad will press back and win. True to form, the tribe of Gad settles on the eastern frontier in exposed territory constantly under threat from raiding nomadic tribes and First Chronicles describes Gad's warriors as men with faces like lions, swift as gazelles on the mountains, a tribe defined by resilience under constant pressure. Asher's blessing points toward abundance. Bread from Asher shall be rich, and he shall yield royal dainties. Asher settles in some of the most fertile land in all Israel, along the coast near modern-day Lebanon, known for olive groves, so productive that, according to ancient tradition, Asher's oil literally flowed like a river, a tribe blessed with material provision. And Naphtali's blessing is almost poetic in its brevity. Naphtali is a deer let loose. He uses beautiful words, a free, swift, eloquent people. Naphtali's territory would later include the region around the Sea of Galilee, and centuries later, it is in this same territory, in the towns of Capernaum and along that same sea, that Jesus would base the majority of his earthly ministry. The prophet Isaiah, writing centuries before Christ, specifically names the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali as the place where a great light would dawn. Matthew's Gospel quotes that exact prophecy and explicitly connects it to Jesus beginning his ministry in Galilee. Two of the smaller, less celebrated tribes in Genesis 49 turn out to be the literal geography where the Gospel begins. Joseph's blessing is the longest in the entire chapter, and it is worth remembering why. Joseph is the son who was sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused, imprisoned, forgotten, and who rose, through nothing but God's providence and his own integrity under pressure, to become the second most powerful man in Egypt. And when famine came, it was Joseph who saved his entire family, the very brothers who betrayed him, from starvation. Jacob's blessing over him reflects that whole arc. Joseph is a fruitful bough by a well. His branches run over the wall. The archers have bitterly grieved him, shot at him, and hated him, but his bow remained in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. Think about a stone dropped into still water. The moment it breaks the surface, rings begin to spread outward, farther than the stone itself ever traveled. That is Joseph. His own suffering, his own betrayal becomes the very thing that saves the family who caused it. And the blessing does not stop with sentiment. Jacob makes a formal decision here that reshapes the entire structure of Israel. He adopts Joseph's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, as his own, granting Joseph effectively a double portion of inheritance split between his two sons. This is why when you actually count the tribal territories in the book of Joshua, you find 13 tribal names on the land, not 12. Levi receives no territory, being scattered among the others as priests, and Joseph's inheritance is doubled through Ephraim and Manasseh. The numbers still work out to 12 tribes holding land, but only because Joseph's loss became Joseph's multiplication. If this is helping you see these 12 names in a way you have not seen them before, help us get this to someone else. Subscribe, leave a comment, share it with a friend. That is how more people find this. Ephraim, the younger of Joseph's two sons, receives a particular blessing of prominence. Jacob crosses his hands deliberately when blessing Ephraim and Manasseh, placing his right hand, the hand of greater blessing, on the younger son's head instead of the elder's, over Joseph's objection. It is the same pattern that runs through the entire book of Genesis: Isaac over Ishmael, Jacob over Esau, Judah's kingship over Reuben's birthright, and now Ephraim over Manasseh. Genesis consistently shows God choosing the younger, the overlooked, the second in line, to carry the greater blessing. It is a pattern that culminates, in the New Testament, with God's own people described as those chosen not by birthright or bloodline, but by grace, in Christ, the ultimate example of the last being made first. Benjamin is last, born last, and Jacob's blessing over him is fierce and brief. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. Benjamin was the son whose birth cost Jacob's beloved wife Rachel her life, the child Jacob nearly lost custody of to Egypt during the famine, the baby of the family, and yet his tribe becomes known for producing fierce, skilled warriors, particularly known in the book of Judges for left-handed slingers with pinpoint accuracy. It is from the tribe of Benjamin that Israel's first king Saul would come, and centuries later, it is from the tribe of Benjamin that the Apostle Paul, in the New Testament, would proudly trace his own lineage, describing himself in Philippians chapter 3 as, "Of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of the Hebrews," the smallest, fiercest tribe producing both Israel's first king and one of Christianity's most influential missionaries. So step back and look at the whole chapter. 12 sons, 12 deeply different characters, some celebrated, some deeply flawed, none of them chosen for their impressiveness. Reuben lost his birthright to instability. Simeon and Levi were cursed for the same act of violence and ended up in opposite places entirely. Judah, the fourth son and far from perfect, received the promise of an eternal throne. Dan drifted into idolatry and vanished from the final list. Joseph turned betrayal into salvation for the very people who betrayed him. And Benjamin, the baby of the family, the one who nearly cost his father everything, became the tribe of both a king and an apostle. This is what the 12 tribes actually are. Not a genealogical chart to memorize, a blueprint for how God builds a people, not out of the impressive, but out of the flawed, the overlooked, the second-born, the ones who failed, and the ones who turned failure into something else. And maybe the part that stays with me most is this: every single one of those 12 sons is still standing in that room at the end of Genesis 49, still blessed, still named, still part of the family, no matter what Jacob had just said about them. The scepter belongs to Judah, but Reuben is still called his father's might. Dan is still called a judge of his people. There is judgment in that room, but there is no one erased. If you have ever looked at your own life and thought your failures had disqualified you from anything meaningful, this is the part of the Bible that was written for you. The 12 tribes prove that God does not need impressive material to build something eternal. He needs willing material. And even the ones who were not willing at first, like Levi standing at the golden calf, or Judah offering himself in his brother's place before Joseph in Egypt, still ended up woven into the story of a kingdom that, in Judah's case, has never actually ended. If this opens something up for you, help us reach someone else with it. Subscribe, leave a comment. Even one word helps more people find this. Share it with someone who has always wondered what those 12 names actually mean. Pray for us. God bless you.